Here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy, altogether wonderful to me. Beauty that made this heart adore you. Hope of a life spent with you. Light of the world, you step down into darkness. Open my eyes, let me see.
All right, we're at our time. I'm sure folks are tuning in online, so we can go ahead and get started here. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do all 3 lessons. This is 3 of 3, and the first 2 lessons was 2 weeks ago and 4 weeks ago. So we're going to continue on with the 3rd lesson and complete our study of the spiritual giftedness. The idea here is that we've got the 5 E's. So the purpose, remember, this is a book written by Doug Hamilton. He gives us the 5 E's and tells us why it's important to know these things. So the first one is we can use these as a tool to evangelize. We can use these tools to evaluate. We can use these information and knowledge to educate. We can encourage others with this. And lastly, equip. So he talks about, hey, this is great to know yourself, but when we learn about each other in our congregation, we're able to stretch our gifts more than if we hadn't had this information. And we do that through the 5 E's. And he breaks this down. We talked about it 4 weeks ago in the first class. And then we moved on to talking about how Jesus used his gifts, but also used the gifts that were closest to him. So he used the people that were near him and what they were good at. And I think it's interesting, you can kind of pinpoint some of those in the show Chosen, and how he talks to Matthew, or how he talks to Peter and John, and how he uses their strengths, which is very important. We talked about that there are miraculous gifts that the apostles had and showed throughout the scriptures, Acts and so forth. And we talked about the non-miraculous gifts in which we see today. And we talked about the reasons for that. These non-miraculous gifts are broken down into 10, and it's mainly 2 verses that we learn about these. So it's the Ephesians 4 gives the example of these, and then I just missed it. I think I passed it while I was flipping through. Yeah, I better say so that you don't think I'm making these up. Ephesians 4:11 through 13 and Romans 12 are the 2 passages that talks about spiritual gifts, and you can see all of these 10 gifts in those verses, and then we see them, onesie twosies throughout the scriptures, which is encouraging too. But what Doug Hamilton does with his book, Spiritual Giftedness, is he kind of organizes them in a way that kind of makes sense, at least to him and to me, and hopefully to you. This isn't the only way to analyze these, but it's a good way because it helps us understand it a little bit more. So we know that those on this half of the chart are speaking focused, meaning they like to teach, they like to use their words and their knowledge to help others. On this side, you have more service focused. So they enjoy doing things with their hands and getting out of the house and studying less to be with people more. We know there's more subjective up here and more objective down here. So we talked about the study first, pray second, or pray first, study second. What are you more likely to do? Are you going to jump into something and then say, hey, let's just pray about this right now and we'll figure out the scriptures later? Or maybe you have the tendency to say, well, before we pray, let's just kind of dig in and understand this first, and then we'll know more about it. And you can be either one of those, and that's okay. So he talks about the tendencies to fall. And if you are one of these as your top one or two, maybe your lowest is going to be the opposite of that. That's just how we're wired. It's not a science. It's kind of an art to understand. If I'm usually this side of the chart, maybe I'm less so on that side of the chart. So we talked on the second lesson about these individual ones. We talked about positives and negatives. Every person has a mature side of their spiritualness, whether they're, like Paul says, they're drinking milk still or they're ready for the meat. We know that there's some negatives or some weaknesses that we can fall into if we don't study hard and mature as Christians. So we studied the missionary, the evangelist, prophet, teacher, and the shepherd, and we learned some of their strengths and weaknesses. And I have a few minutes. We'll just review those real quick. So the first one was the missionary. We looked at how it was called apostle there, but apostle just meant sent with a message, and that's our modern word today. Is missionary is someone who's sent with a message. They are the ones who are easily adaptable to different cultures. They're non-materialistic. They don't hold their treasures on earth. They're ready to leave everything and do what they need to do. And they're the visionary Christians that we have in our churches. But be careful, because at times they may be impulsive, impractical, and even impatient, often demanding more than certain people are ready for. We talked about the evangelist. The evangelist is someone who has a passion to share the good news of Christ. They really want to knock on that door because they got this exciting news. And that's more than just, telling people, that they have sin and they need to be washed by Jesus. It's not the bad news that they're excited about. They're excited for that good news, and they're knowledgeable, they're determined, and faithful to delivering that. These are the people who are personal. They get along with others. They're motivating, they're vocal. But be careful, they may be emotional and impulsive and intense. So we don't want to take it to that extreme. We talked about the passion of confrontation. This is your prophet. Okay, we need prophets because not only are they well versed in the truth and they know the scriptures very well, they're decisive people and they're disciplined people. We need these people to kind of say what needs to be said. And at times, that may be a difficult thing, especially if you're not one that's so immersed in the truth. You're more loving and caring and kind. These are the people who don't mind saying it as it is, whether it's positive or negative. The negatives that this character quality has, if not corrected, they may have rough relationships. They may be intimidating, whether if they're teaching or just speaking to you, and they may kind of be dogmatic or strict. And they have erratic emotions. Often they can be angry or pessimistic. So we want to avoid these. All right, next is the passion of teaching. We went into depth about a teacher. Okay, these are the people who really understand their curriculum, their material, and they know how best to communicate that. Okay, so the difference between someone who lectures and someone who teaches is the lecturer just gives the information. A teacher makes sure the student understands it. And these people have a deep desire to ensure that their audience understands, and they're willing to do the extra go the extra mile to ensure that. So they study really well. They're very stable and firm in their position, and they're factual about their feelings of the Bible. And they have satisfaction. They're content with context. They're not searching for what's not there. They will be grounded in the truth. But watch out. They may be really complex in how they do too much studying, and maybe they dive in it so much that we kind of lose the gist or the focus of what's being taught. They may be conceit, and they're conscious, right? So they may be too aggressive, too anxious, too angry to really understand the purpose in the delivery by getting a little bit too involved.
Which one was that?
That one was teacher. You're starting to hone in on yours? All right, good. All right, good. Yeah. And we talked about that. We said, wow, some of these negatives we can see in different people or in us, or the difficulty in seeing the negatives, right? We want to view ourselves positively, and we're thinking, I don't know if this is me. That's why it's important not only to do a self-evaluation, but to also talk to people you know and have them say, you may not want to hear this, but you do have some of these negatives, and you might find yourself in one of these categories, which is good, so that we can then focus on improving those weaknesses into strengths. Good, so that was teacher, and then we talked about shepherd. Shepherds are the people who are passionate about people. They love to get involved nurturing others, caring for others, witnessing to others. They're personal. They know the flock. They tend to the flock. They're independent. They have a maturity level that doesn't need support from everyone. They can be the ones to support everyone. And they are protective as well, patient, loving, willing to give you the shirt off their back because they know it's going to help you become better. But watch out, they may be too independent, whether it's being prideful, controlling, considering themselves heroes. That's all in pride. They may be neglectful. Their strength is that they tend to the flock. Their weakness is that they may neglect their family or their spouse or someone that needs them more. And they may become discouraged, just overwhelmed with just reaching as many people as possible, and then they become somewhat depressed because they've stretched themselves too thin. So those are the qualities of the pastor or the shepherd or the elder. And this isn't just a man's role. There can be women who have this deep desire to take care of others, to tend to others that are hurting and need help, and support them that way. All right, so now we're going to focus on number 6, which is the, did I put it on there? Encouragement. It's too cluttered, Tony. Where am I looking? Here we go. Encourager. That's number 6. 5 is shepherd. Number 6 is encourager. All right. Exhortation. These are people who have a passion to encourage. It's about 7% of the congregation will test highest in this gift. And in Luke 16:25, we find it in the purest form. Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your life you received good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. But now he is being comforted here, and you are in agony." So you remember the story of Lazarus and Abraham and the chasm that Lazarus was and his friends were on the other side, and they asked Lazarus questions, and the passage says that Lazarus was comforted while the others were on the other side in agony. So that word comforted is the encouragement, the Greek word that we're using here. This is a person who strives to be incredibly welcoming to those around him. Help maintain a spirit of congeniality in the congregation. Examples of this is Barnabas. We read in Acts how he was an encourager. We know that Judas and Silas were encouragers in Acts 15. We know that John the Baptist was gifted in being an encourager. And of course, Paul, we read this in 1 Thessalonians. And then Paul also received encouragement back from other Christians. And he talks about this in his letters back and forth. We can see in Colossians 4 how he was encouraged by the church. Some of the mature attributes of an encourager is that they're self-driven, they're optimists, and they're motivators. They always look at the glass half full and never half empty. They hold this positive attitude in all circumstances, both good and bad. I don't know if you're thinking of anybody, but my mom comes immediately into mind in that you could be in a car wreck and she would say something nice about it. Like, well, at least you're going to get a new car, or something, fun or friendly about it, right? Like, you're just like, wow, Mom, you're never negative. Like, you never look at the bad thing, and these people are built that way, and that they can turn something that looks grim into a positive. These are the people who are expressive. They're creative, they're great communicators, they're practical, they have healthy relationships, and they unify people through counseling or being friendly. Now watch out. Here's some of these signs of immaturity. They may be impulsive, whether they interrupt people or they act without thinking or they just move in too fast without thinking. They want to help so much that maybe they're a little bit too forward and they don't think about the situation. They may have unstable emotions, whether they're depressed or over-humorous, right? So if you just want to keep everything light and fluffy all the time, you just make a joke of everything, and maybe that's not what's necessary at the time. So be careful for those. And they may be intense by just really encouraging others into action. Just do this, do this, do this. And it's like, okay, let's turn it down just a little bit, because they may be over encouraging to a point of creating a distance between somebody. Encouragers are non-confrontational. These are our people who are non-confrontational. When you add immaturities to this equation, bad things happen. Sometimes there needs to be correction before a person can be encouraged. When the encourager fails to incorporate this fact, they end up encouraging others into the wrong thing. Immature encouragers must beware lest they lead people to do the wrong actions. So you can easily see how God's gift to us, if not taken the right way or taken seriously, can lead someone down the wrong path that we don't want to do. I'm reminded of dear friends of ours in the Philippines who had premarital sex. They were going to have a child. Even though they were Christians in the church, this was a very vulnerable time for them. They came, they confessed it. Before they went to the church, they went to my parents. And this is a time that not only they were vulnerable, but really they needed the most encouragement. And there are times that, I'm not saying any particular congregation, but there are times that a congregation may not be the encouraging people we need to be during the times of someone's rough patch. So, it is incumbent on an encourager to seek out the times that are needed most. And this is when my mom and my dad really kind of supported this young couple, told them that they need to get in right in the Lord's eyes, and they ended up coming back into the church, confessing it, and were reunited with their family. So you can tell how when someone is most vulnerable, these people take action, and they're necessary to bring out the greater good. All right. That's the gist of it. Doug talks a lot more and gives examples. But before I go on, is there any comments or anyone that had questions about encourager? All right, so the next one, and feel free to interrupt with a question anytime. The next one is mercy. This is number 7, mercy giver. The passion of mercy we can find in Romans 12:8. He who shows mercy with cheerfulness. This is about 70% of a congregation. The Greek word means one who shows compassion. The mercy giver has the gift of being able to understand the suffering of others to extend that they are compelled to help. So they're so moved by someone's suffering that they're called into action. Tabitha demonstrated this type of mercy in Acts 9. The Philippian jailer showed this to Paul and Silas in Acts 16. And the Samaritan was a mercy giver. You know, remember the story that Jesus gave. The priest walked by, the Levite walked by, but who stopped to help? It was the Samaritan, because he was motivated and moved by it. So here's the signs of maturity. They have a positive attitude on life. They're forgiving in relationships. They're gentle in spirit. They forget the fault of others. And they have a heart for others. This is more than your average person. They're really called to have that heart. They're magnets for the wounded. They're listeners to the neglected. They're faithful in the relationships. I want to read an excerpt from Hamilton's book where he gives this story. He talks about Darren, an extreme mercy giver and one of the current elders. He tested highest in this category. He retired from the Air Force years ago and decided to go back to school to train for another career. What was his choice of higher education? Counseling, of course. For mercy givers, make the best counselors. They tend to be good listeners, something that is of the highest priority to the mercy giver. He says that Doug says that he's lowest in the mercy giver, and as a result, people tend to shy away from his counseling. I really do not have the patience to listen the way Darren does. And I've noticed over the years that whenever someone from the congregation is going to a bad time, Darren is who they turn to. Whether it's sexual sins, poor marriages, personal conflicts, emotional instability, I shudder to think what it would be like if this brother was not a part of the eldership. I look forward to seeing how God will use him in the future, and I'm confident that his merciful heart will continue to help others to grow in their relationships to Jesus. So he's saying, wow, what an awesome ministry being a mercy giver is, and how a congregation without that could really be hurting in a lot of areas that they're not able to get that nurturing. These people are attentive. They're attentive to people's hurts, people's problems, and I'll just say I'm not a mercy giver. I may kind of hear someone's story and then just think that was a story. A mercy giver is going to hear that story and find the hurt. Where is the hurt, and how can I be of service to that person? They reach out to the poor, to the ill, and to the elderly. Here's some of the immaturities. They may be indecisive, inconsistent in reactions, neglectful in corrections, and they may be doormats in a relationship. They may be emotional, prone to depression, prone to sorrow, and they may lack perspective, being uninformed, disorganized, or undisciplined. So they may be overwhelmed just with the collective sorrow of those they're around. They tend to have much more sorrow in their lives as a result of internally taking on the problems of others. Mercy givers also tend to be oversensitive in their reactions to others who confront them. So maybe they're on the street and someone yells a hurtful thing to them. They may kind of hold that, instead of brushing it off, being like, oh, that person's crazy, maybe they take that too far and hold on to it longer than they should. That's the tendency of a mercy, is that they feel that deepness a little bit more than others. All right, so that's mercy. We want to understand the negatives to turn them into positives and be strong in this gift. Questions or additions or comments on that? All right, number 8 is servant. The passion of helping. We see this in Romans 12:7. If service is his gift, or it says Romans 12:7. If service in his serving. So as you do it well. 1 Peter 4 says, as each one has received a special gift, employ it in serving one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Whoever serves is to do so as one who is served, or who is serving by the strength which God supplies. So So this isn't a suggestion, it's a command. This is something we need to do in the service of the Lord. Now, this is one of the largest categories we have. He suggests that about 22% of a congregation will test highest in this as a servant. These are the people who care about providing care for others. They're the maintenance people for people. They are compelled to work harder, more diligently, and longer than your average service in the congregation. So they want to stay longer and help more than someone who may be gifted in some of these other areas. We know Martha, the story of Jesus visiting Mary and Martha. We know that Martha was complaining to Jesus, saying, "Hey, I'm doing all these preparations. Tell Mary to help me." And Jesus says, Martha, you're doing well, but you're missing the point here. And Mary has decided to listen. That will not be taken from her. And what I remember specifically, Doug was trying to communicate, is that Martha makes a mistake of trying to impose her passion on another. We're not all gifted the same way. And here is Martha saying, "Man, I'm really gifted in service. Hey, Jesus, tell other people to help me be better in service." And Jesus is saying, this isn't going to be taken from her. Mary has a different gift, and that's okay. So let's not make that mistake of trying to say, wow, I'm gifted in something, and I really want everybody else to do it just like me. That may not be what Jesus is trying to communicate in the story of Martha. So here's some signs of maturity for the servant. They work well with their hands. They're resourceful with their meetings, and they're good at meeting needs. They're incredibly spiritual. They pray more. They fellowship more. They're more patient. They come early. They have this strong work ethic. It's shown through their efforts. They're involved with the service, but they're also pleasant in their service. So it's not forced. Signs of immaturity may be that they're often fatigued, and they may be unable to say no, so they just say yes all the time, and they're spread too thin, and they're just overly tired. They might take on too much or take on something that's impossible for them to accomplish. They may be emotional, over-talkative, and they may have personality struggles by micromanaging others, being indecisive, or overly passive. So they want something so bad that they're blinded by completing the service that they're starting to neglect the people that need to be addressed during the service. I want to read a story from Doug here where he talks about this. John was a very active servant in the church family, but needed to mature in his passion. He enjoyed helping people with any need, but had difficulty saying no. Every now and then he would find someone who would tend to exploit his kindness by making unreasonable requests. They would ask for a ride and end up making John their personal chauffeur. If they needed help on a project at their home, John became their carpenter. He simply allowed himself to be used by people who did not have Christ in mind. And at one point, one of these so-called friends took great advantage of him by having him drive across the country for a move. They were to pay him, but then they did not. They used John's car, his fuel, his time, and they didn't pay a dime. And this really frustrated John, and it almost caused him to give up on the people of faith, but it was only through encouragement of more mature servants that he was able to learn not to be a doormat. He finally learned to say no when it was appropriate, and now on a path of wiser service to God. So here's John really trying to make a difference, but he was unable to see that people were not Christian, and just people wanted to take advantage of him, and he suffered because of that. So as he matured, I'm sure he finds ways to help people that really matter and not help people that don't matter, if that makes sense. Another story is the single parent servant. Started out with her constantly caving to Michael's every need. This is the wife. To avoid an argument with him concerning the cleanliness. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a mother and her son. So she caved to Michael's every need, her son. To avoid an argument with him concerning the cleanliness of his room, she would end up cleaning it herself. When his messiness spread through the home, she expanded her own cleanup effort as well. Jenny verbally chastised Michael about not doing the work, but ended up doing it all by herself anyway. After all, her servant heart really did not mind picking up after him. Later on, when her son misbehaved in other areas, Jenny trained him to be catered to, literally. For example, she would call him to the table for supper, and he would be busy playing video games or something more interesting. So she ended up bringing his supper to him on the coffee table of the living room. It wasn't long before Michael had become spoiled, selfish. He had little respect for his doormat mother. He started back-talking, retaliated, micromanagement. He rebelled even more, and she pretty much gave up. Where's Michael today? Well, he's a resident of the state correctional facility. He picked up he does pick up his room now because he's in a prison cell. The guards are his new mother. Would it have been different if Jenny's ministerial passion was used properly? She struggles with that thought every day. So here's a mother who cares for her son, who has this servant heart, who wants to serve him, but when push came to shove, instead of enforcing what she knew was right, she just did it for him, and it turned out wrong. So it's just an example of how we can use our gifts in a negative way. Okay, so this is servant. Questions, additions, stories, people you know? Sure. That's right. Martha was doing a good thing. She was serving. That's a positive Christian thing to do for the people you love. But be careful that you're not so blinded like she was that now you're unable to see the bigger picture, and that goes for any gift. We'll get through the passion of management, administrator, and then we'll end with giver. Sorry, giver is up there. All right. So administrator. This is the passion of management. It's about 10% of a typical congregation. And the Greek word, it basically means to put before, to set over, to rules. This is someone who is gifted by managing their household well. We know that Paul said that in 1 Timothy 3:4. When he talks about an elder, an elder should manage their household well. This manages this administrator intent. Jethro is a perfect example of this in the story of Moses. Moses' father-in-law went to Moses and saw that he was kind of worn out and worn thin because Moses was trying to take on too much. And what did Jethro do? He's like, whoa, you need to think about this, man. Let's get some chiefs and tribe leaders and figure this out on a lower level, and the things that they can't take care of, they'll eventually bring up to you. So he was gifted in kind of thinking about things and finding a solution to the problem. The apostles demonstrated this gift with the Acts chapter 6 example. This is the example where there was a flaw in the widow ministry. They were being neglected, and they decided to find some good men to focus on it, and their plan worked because the widows were being cared for during that time. So some maturity signs are they are effective planners. They're good with charts and statistics. They're accurate in their assessments. They're They're very goal-oriented. They're deliberative, prompt, prepared, complete. And they are our leaders. They want to participate. They're charged with helping more than just themselves. They're good at organizing, and they're good at problem solving. So these are the thinkers that know how to put it into action. Mature administrators do not have to tell others that he or she is the leader, for they are known by their fruit. They just do it. They have a proven track record of being cool under crisis. Well-developed administrators conduct themselves in an organized way. From the words they speak to the schedules they keep, people turn to them when they have problems because they know good advice and will surely follow. And you can see this even in the business world, that someone who has this gift can really kind of organize in a way that's effective instead of being distracted by things that are ineffective. Signs of maturity, those were the maturity signs. Planners, deliberate, well-organized. The signs of immaturity is that they can also be abrasive, maybe pushy, insensitive. They may come across as a know-it-all, overly competitive, maybe overplanned, overdriven. They may have a problem with pride. They may be slow to admit a mistake, overconfident, or self-centered. So we need to be careful that one who is a born leader doesn't take it too far. And I think we know examples of that. He talks about one here in his book, which I thought was good. Frank was a minister in a small congregation. He was hired immediately after finishing his university studies. The church assumed that all ministers were the same in the gospel drive, but not Frank. He was in reality an underdeveloped administrator. He was never going to fit the mold they were expecting, for he equated minister and planner as synonymous. Everything he learned from college concerning ministry was theory, not practical. His degree was not in the Bible, but in business administration. He wanted to be a manager of the church, not a minister. That should have been a dead giveaway to the congregation, but they knew nothing of the spiritual giftedness and the like. He did not like to make hospital visits. He did not like to volunteer for youth activities, and he didn't like to teach Bible classes. His ambition was to be a leader without actually leading. He liked the designation of minister, but not the responsibilities that came with that title. Evangelism for Frank was writing out this plan and then giving it to the congregation to carry out. The church family attempted to encourage him in the right direction, but things turned sour. He pulled the immaturity administrator card in response, saying, "I'm trying to lead, but nobody wants to follow." And Doug says he just didn't get it. Eventually, he was fired and permanently left the ministry. Hopefully, he'll be back when he matures. So someone who was buffed up with this, I'm in control, but really wasn't a servant, wasn't willing to do what he needed to do to really shepherd and lead the flock in the way that they should go. He wanted to make the plan, but not execute it himself. And you'll find that it's hard to lead when you're not willing to do some of those things. So that's an example of an administrator not being mature and learning the best way to be effective in his congregation. So again, all of these are needed. We want this diversity, because if we're all the same, we're not going to be as impactful to evangelize, educate, encourage, or equipping everyone. All right, additions before we move to the last one. Got about 5 minutes here. Benevolence, the passion of benevolence. This is our givers in the congregation, and it's usually about 2% of a typical congregation. The Greek word gives means to share. Luke 3:10 says, "And he would answer and say to them, let the man who has 2 tunics share with him who has none, and let him who has food do likewise." Ephesians 4, "Let him who steals steal no longer, but rather let him labor, performing with his own hands what is good, in order that he may have something to share with him who is in need." So we must not confuse regular charity with the ministerial passion of the giver. This passion is someone who does not ask, how much can I give to the Lord, but whether, how much do I need to live on so that I can give the rest. Their motto is give to God first, and all these things shall be added to you, just as it says in Matthew 6:33. We see this example in the widow at the treasury in Luke chapter 21. It talks about how she gave all she had, even though it was something small. And Jesus says that she gave more than anybody else. It was not the amount she gave, nor the time chosen, but the attitude in which she carried it out. She had the heart of a giver, having put it all that she had to live on. She gave it all for the work of God that put her in the position to be completely dependent on God for the rest. So these aren't just the people who give a lot of money. These are people who have that passion that no matter what, they're going to give them themselves, whether it's time, money, energy, or resources, they have that passion. Ananias and Sapphira is a bad example. Okay, you remember this story where they heard about the ministry of everyone else, and they're like, wow, a lot of good's being doing. Let's also do some good, and let's give some. So they sold the property, and they gave some of the money, but what happened in their hearts? They were like, let's just say it's all. Let's just say it's all. And that's the opposite of what a giver is. A giver doesn't give because he wants just to have all the money and get the praise. A giver wants to give in secret for the sole purpose of why he's giving, and to give it all. And Ananias didn't understand that. They tried to trick God and paid the price. Jesus talks about hypocrites in Matthew 6. He says, when therefore you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be honored by men. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your alms may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will repay you. So these people are generous. They give with wisdom. They give generously. They give anonymously. They're charitable. They're attentive to the needs of others. They're prayerful for those needs, and they're committed to the needs of others. They're sensitive to the needs of those who suffer among them. Their screening process includes great prayer and consideration in regard to the Scriptures. They tend to be reliable. They're lighthearted in a crisis. They're enduring in conflict, and they're dependable in poverty. So these are people who will look past the surface things and really want to get to know on a deeper level who they're giving to, because they care about that ministry. I think at times, and I've been guilty of this, we just kind of give our check or our money into the church contribution basket and then just go home thinking, wow, I did well. But do we really know how that's being used? Is it being used to the best of our ability? There are many people in the world who think they're doing a lot of good only to have that money corrupted by people who aren't doing the right things with it. And these are the givers. The givers want to know, well, who am I helping? How am I helping them? Because maybe I could do more. The negatives, the immaturity side of a giver is that they may have a bad attitude, critical of the lesser givers around them. They may be critical of church budgets, or they may be self-critical. They tend to judge others through their own eyes instead of through the spiritual giftedness of their giving. They lack awareness. They tend to be unheard or underfunded or unprepared to be a receiver of a gift. They can be gullible by not doing their research, or they may give unworthy causes, or they may be viewed as softies. So let's not get into the negatives of this. I had an example, but we're short on time. Is there any other comments on the gift, spiritual giftedness, giver, or any of the other ones? Sure.
So I guess just to summarize, for myself, I think I've missed some of your facts. So every Christian has one or more spiritual gifts, and how they land on us and how they come out of us depends on our spiritual maturity, our emotional security. So we have these good things that God has given us, and they're going to come out of us in a positive or a negative way, kind of depending on where we're at spiritually. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, right on. So this isn't just, And you're not stuck with this forever. If you find out what your gift is, you can grow in it and grow in others, and you can do more than one. So you're exactly right. All right, so I'm passing out the test here, okay? You can go on to findmyspiritualgift.com, which Doug Hamilton put up. It's a free test that you can do. Once you get the results of that test, it'll be emailed to you, and you're welcome to do that. Or you can just do it, Or you can just do it right here. So I got 30 of these copies. I can make more if needed. These take about 5 minutes.
We need one more over here.
All right, let's pass this one over, if you don't mind. Oh, he's got it. And there's more here. You got extras. All right, this takes 5 minutes. It's 80 questions, and it's simple. Just, -2 if you're not like it, +2 if you're like it, or anything in between. I like working with my hands, okay? I prefer to be a teacher. I don't like working my hands, or I prefer to mow the lawn. I don't want to be a teacher. I'm going to write that in there. Yes?
I think it's important to note when you take this test, don't think too much about it, and be honest about what is a natural inclination and not what you want yourself.
Very good. And also I'll say, there was a lady who was disabled, and she felt that she wasn't a good servant, and she couldn't really find where she fits. Come to find out, she was a servant, but she had trouble serving because of her disability. So take this test in the mindset of, if I'm able, I want to do this, if that makes sense. So if you have those shortcomings or whatnot, don't think about, well, I can't do that because of this. Say that this is what I want to do if I could, all right? What else? So the purpose of me giving you this, like I said, there's benefits in knowing what you are, but it's also beneficial for the congregation. So here's my charge to you, is to complete this either today or soon. Once it's completed, we're going to put them all together. Let's use this over here. So there's this tissue table over here. When they're completed, give them to me or Kelsey, or put them over there. And the intent is for us to add them up, score you, and give you the results next week. But if you don't mind, if you do mind, please tell me. But if you don't mind, we would love to share those results with others, and I would love to give that announcement, or put it into the bulletin, or put it somewhere that it's obvious, so that we can look and say, oh, Sister so-and-so, her top 3 are these gifts, her bottom 2 are these gifts, and we can use that information to help each other minister to others. So, like I said, if you don't want your information, feel free to just let me know. Otherwise, if you put your results over there, or not your results, but the test, we will score it for you, or you're welcome to score it yourself, and compile them all together and find out where we lie as a congregation. And then I have more if you guys need, or you can go to the website. There's multiple ways. Now, lastly, there is the test that you evaluate yourself on, but many times we may have this fog of war and we're unable to see certain things. So what he recommends is also to find someone who knows you very well and kind of bounce ideas off of them and have them rate you in what they think you are as well. This will help really narrow in what you're strong and what you're weak in and give you that information. We are at our time. Any other comments?
So I take it you want us to put our names on?
Oh, yeah. Or I will if you hand it to me. Yes, put your names at the top. Anything else? Thank you guys once again. This was something encouraging to me. When Kelsey and I went to church camp in Kansas as counselors, we did this test for the campers, and we gave them bracelets that were a color of each one. So, orange was mercy giver, green was prophet, blue was evangelist, whatever, so that the kids could kind of go around and find people who were like them and encourage each other that way. It was a great icebreaker to say, oh, you're a giver, I'm a giver too, let's talk about it. So that's what I want for us. Maybe we won't have bracelets, but we can have that information and knowledge and share it with each other. Remember, a prophet may have a weakness of coming over too strong. It may not be a good encourager in all circumstances. So wouldn't it be great to grab a friend and go to someone who will be able to balance that encouragement or that counseling. Thank you guys once again. Yep. Let's just say a quick prayer. Father, we give these gifts into your hands. We know that you've given them to us to do with them the best we can. Help us to have this awareness, but more importantly, turn our weaknesses into strengths so that you may be glorified by these gifts. In Jesus' name, amen.